Julius Kellogg was a hero of enormous dimension. He was a tall African-American player. My tendency to call him Negro, that's what you called him then, that's what I call him in the book, who played for Manhattan College.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Manhattan College had been dumping games before that. Hank Poppy was involved, Burns was involved, a number of people were involved in that. When Kellogg came, Kellogg, first of all, was from Virginia, which is not unimportant because he didn't have the New York standards of what passed for street virtue that New York players have. That's an important thing to consider in this.
Would street virtue include you keep your mouth shut?
Yeah, you don't rat.
You don't rat.
You know? No matter what it is, unless somebody's going to get killed, you don't rat out your teammates or your friends.
Right.
You know, you don't turn them in.
We have it up here too. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when they came to Kellogg and offered him money to go along, they had to get Kellogg because when he came up, he was a tremendous power on that team. They offered him the money, and he didn't know what to do. He contacted the district attorney's office and told them, and they set up a meeting.
Can I interject something? So a kid like Kellogg, an African-American kid from Virginia, where discrimination was in full flower, this was his way out, and he knew, if I understand correctly, that if he fails to report it and it is discovered that he failed to report it, he loses his scholarship and his life's over.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And he didn't have the conflict that the New York kids had. You know, if you envision, people say, why did so many of them go along with it? You only needed really one or two who wanted to act as the intermediaries. After that, a player who was not involved was confronted with the worst of Hobson's choices. He could do one of three things. He could say, okay, I'll go along. He could say, well, I won't go along, but I'm not going to say anything about it because the worst thing you can do is turn in your teammates. And so now he's obliged to play a game knowing that there might be, but he's not sure in this game, two of his teammates not playing too hard.
Yeah, yeah.
The third thing he could do is go turn him in, which is against all the rules he ever grew up with.
Right.
So he had no good choice. And it probably seemed to some of them, like Eddie Roman, who got into this late, that the easiest thing is just to go along with it. I can't turn him in. I don't want to play when I know this guy is throwing passes to the crowd. And so that's what he was confronted with. Julius Kellogg did not have that conflict.
Right.
He had a different set of values, and he turned in, and once he blew the whistle on the Manhattan College players, the DA's office began to investigate to see how much further it went.
And it went lots further.
Oh.
Yeah. And you point out that this was going on all over the country, but only in New York did they take strong legal action against the players. The rest of the country sort of whitewashed it. And you put that in the context of small-town America and its differences from New York City. Why don't you elaborate a little bit on what you were thinking about, what you meant by all of that?
Well, small towns tend to take care of their own. There's not much going on in those places. I don't know how much else goes on in Peoria, Illinois, where Bradley was.
Well, I lived in Lawrence, Kansas back in the 60s,
Yeah.
and I know what you're speaking about. Lovely place, wonderful place,
Yeah.
but nothing's happened.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the high school teams or the college teams,
Except the basketball team, excuse me, that's your point, really.
That's
There's
what?
nothing happening except that the basketball team and the football team.
That's right. They become, enormous heroes.
Yeah.
They're extolled. You have fathers who are asking for autographs from their son's high school teammates, which is totally ludicrous to begin with. And so when something like this happens, they tend to take care of these guys.
Yeah.
Whatever they did, so they made a mistake, but they're ours, they're our own, they're one of us, they're our heroes. In New York City, you had a whole other dimension, and took it more seriously, I think. You were not getting that latitude. I mean, the idea of going to City College to begin with was considered such an enormous privilege.
Yeah, yeah.
That you turned around and spat on. There was that instinct as well.
Yeah.
You went there when others could have gone there. For every person that gets in, there's probably somebody who just didn't make it.
Right.
And we overcame this picture that the rest of the country had of us.
Right.
And now we were heroes, and now they understood that we can play with them, and now you smudged it, you dirtied it.
Right.
And so it was a terrible thing in New York,
Yeah.
And the small towns covered it up. I mean, if you want real justice, which is difficult to get anyway, you know, you're much better off trying a big city than a small town. It's a small town, everybody knows everyone from the judge to the cop on the beat.
This excerpt is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law, the leader of reform in legal education and a leader in multimedia education for the public. To view the full interview and for a full listing of MSL's programs, log on to mslaw.edu.